Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Is there a boogeyman in the heavyweight division? Or is it more a case of non-existent matchmaking? We'll talk about it in this video, because Eddie Hearn has claimed that Michael Hunter is the new boogeyman of the heavyweight division. In recent years, some fans have claimed that Luis Ortiz has been the boogeyman, and there's a couple of other fighters in this video, Martin Bakole and Filip Hrgovic, who are also finding fights hard to come by, the sort of fights that they want to be in right now. But we'll start with Michael Hunter, because his promoter Eddie Hearn has stated, "We have to find Michael Hunter a fight, no question. He's really become the boogeyman of the heavyweight division. It's no easy task, but he's willing to fight anyone, so we can expect him to jump back into the deep end, and we hope to find him a fight soon." So Michael Hunter, is he a boogeyman? I don't necessarily think so myself, but he has been on the rise in the heavyweight division. 31 years old, former cruiserweight who moved up. He's been on a bit of a tear since he came up from cruiser a couple of years ago. Wins over Iago Kaladze, a good win over Martin Bakole. It was an upset win back in 2018. Alexander Ustinov, Fabio Maldonado in 2018 and 2019, as well as Sergey Kuzmin, very good win, and a draw with Alexander Povetkin. It's a decent body of work at heavyweight, but, no one is, I think, hardly quaking in their boots at that resume. It's not like he's knocked out 3 or 4 top 10s in a row. He got a draw against Povetkin, and it was a very close fight against a guy who's 40 years old and certainly on the decline. But it was an entertaining fight, so, I don't know why we didn't get that run back again. And now Alexander Povetkin seemingly is going to be facing Dillian Whyte in a pay-per-view event in the United Kingdom in April or May. But see, this is part of the issue for me with a lot of these guys that are on this list that that I'm going to go through. And it's that old adage that high risk, low reward. Plus also for Michael Hunter, he's got the stink of the cruiserweight tag. I mean, if a guy like Alexander Usyk has been called a nobody by the likes of Dillian Whyte, Tyson Fury, Jarrell Miller, guys are just giving him no sort of credit at all, even though he's a former undisputed champion. What hope does Michael Hunter have in terms of getting those fights? Because he's not seen as a guy with a huge amount of prestige around his name at the moment, even though he has been earning his stripes in the ring. So he's in between a rock and a hard place right now. And I would have liked to have seen that Povetkin fight run back, and I would have picked Michael Hunter again. I did pick him in the first fight, although I thought Alexander Povetkin shaded that in December. But it was a good fight, but Michael Hunter, I don't think he's invincible. I think he's a beatable fighter, and a guy like Povetkin on the slide shows that, you can be in a competitive fight with Michael Hunter, and he's not just going to have it all his own way. Although he did have it all his own way against Sergey Kuzmin. But at this point, I think Sergey Kuzmin is a sort of second-tier level heavyweight, top 30, top 40 at the moment. So at a certain level, Michael Hunter is going to be in some very good fights. I think he's always going to be in a fun fight. But part of his issue, high risk, relatively low reward. At the moment, can they have him as a headliner on a DAZN card? Because at the moment, he has effectively been an undercard fighter, although the co-main event with Alexander Povetkin. So he certainly needs to be in fights where he's got a good opponent, a good dance partner, as it were, to help sell a card that he's on. And this is probably part of his trouble and the others on this list, that they're good fighters in their own right, but they don't necessarily bring in loads of fans and loads of dollars at this point in their career. I mean, certainly they can try to change that, but a big part of this, and I think this is often forgotten, what are the promoters doing in this situation? Because Eddie Hearn is saying that Michael Hunter is becoming the boogeyman of the heavyweight division, but he's got a very big heavyweight stable that he should be actually looking to employ here and make some in-house fights. In the past 12 to 18 months, they've built up a big stable of heavyweights at Matchroom. But where are these in-house fights that we should be expecting on a regular basis? Sure, we've had Alexander Povetkin versus Michael Hunter, Alexander Povetkin versus Hughie Fury, and Alexander Povetkin against Dillian Whyte coming up by the look of it. But Alexander Povetkin isn't necessarily in the Matchroom stable. He's working with Matchroom, but he's not on one of these big deals like Hunter, Alexander Usyk, Filip Hrgovic, Martin Bakole, other fighters, Joseph Parker. And you've got all these guys, these names I've just mentioned, they're all in the same stable, finding it hard to get meaningful fights, but why can't they be fighting each other? So I think Hearn needs to, in this case with Hunter, take it on the chin here and try to really build him into a bigger name than he is. Try to get him in a meaningful fight. It's all well and good saying that, we need to get him in a good fight, but you just actually have to do it. And he's trying to, in some ways, generate this boogeyman narrative and that to help sell Michael Hunter to fans and the rest of the division. And it seems to be when a guy is high risk, low reward, they get this boogeyman tag to try help them into some fights. So I do think that the onus here is on his promoter, Eddie Hearn, to actually help him into some better fights than he already is. And sure, some of these guys, you can't force them into the ring together because they have their own careers to think about. They've got their own managers and advisors advising them. But I've heard Martin Bakole and Billy Nelson, Martin Bakole's trainer, begging for the Hunter rematch, but there's just no talk about that, and Michael Hunter hasn't really acknowledged it himself either. And if we go to Martin Bakole, he's falling in that same sort of boat. Since his loss to Michael Hunter, he's improved, he's been getting better, he's seen some very good wins, he's looking very, very dangerous. A very big puncher out of the Congo, obviously fighting in the United Kingdom at the moment. It's the same thing again. High risk, low reward. Doesn't bring a huge amount of dollars or fan recognition with him at the moment. He, for all intents and purposes, like Hunter, at the moment is an undercard fighter, but they just can't seem to get him into the fights that he needs to be in. Bakole himself, after that loss to Hunter, wins over Marius Wok, battered him. He also stopped Yatalo Pereira, a very durable journeyman. He stopped Kevin Johnson, very durable journeyman as we know. And he stopped another durable journeyman, Rodney Hernandez. So he's ready for bigger and better and much more high-profile fights, co-main event type sort of recognition. But seemingly he just can't get the opponents to jump in the ring. And this also comes back to the reason why Martin Bakole, Michael Hunter, they end up signing for an Eddie Hearn who's got a big heavyweight stable, because they're hoping to get into big fights to progress their careers. But it seems to be failure to launch for Hunter, Bakole and others at the moment. And Filip Hrgovic, the next guy that I'll move to, it's the same again. Currently, he is, on BoxRec at least, rated number 13th heavyweight in the world. He just stopped Eric Molina recently, Mario Heredia, Gregory Corbin, Kevin Johnson before that, Amir Mansour. Those are some okay style, come up through the level type fights. He's currently 10-0. But with his extensive amateur pedigree and his level at the moment, he needs to be in much bigger and better fights. And seemingly he's not getting provided them. And this is part of the reason, because he's promoted by Sauerland, and then they joined on a co-promotional deal with Matchroom. I'm sure they were expecting to be in much better fights by this point. And it seems to be fans are looking at all these situations with guys who've signed on these deals, but nothing much is happening for them at the moment. And sure, there is a bit of a malaise at the top of the division. You have guys fighting out rematches or mandatories or whatever, so you can't be talking about title fights. But there needs to be a level of fights below that for guys who are legitimate top 30 guys who are sort of fighting each other to contest to get to that next step. And guys like Hrgovic, Bakole and Hunter are struggling to get into some of those sort of fights. That Michael Hunter versus Alexander Povetkin fight was the first time that, Hunter was able to land a really high-profile fight, and he gave a good account of himself. Ended up being a draw, but because it was a draw, he's almost stagnated since then. Alexander Povetkin, maybe some will say that he was lucky to get away with the draw. It's going to help him into a pay-per-view event against Dillian Whyte to collect a big fat check, where I think most people would have liked to have seen the Hunter and Povetkin fight run back. But obviously Povetkin, a prize fighter, why wouldn't he take the money that's on offer against Dillian Whyte? These guys want to get to that type level where they're big established names in their own rights. They can be a main event sort of fighter on their own. They can, fight in different parts of the world against good competition and earn good money. But at the moment, their promoter, Eddie Hearn, isn't providing those opportunities. Hopefully 2020 is going to see, some of these guys get some of the opportunities they deserve. Because at the moment, and you can throw other names in there as well, like a Joseph Parker, he's been in a few tune-ups in a row. Some of these guys should be fighting against each other. And I know that may actually sort of, curtail a title shot. But if these guys are prize fighters and they want the glory, and they want to be held in a certain regard by fans, they have to come through tough, rugged fights against top guys instead of coasting their way to title shots. I mean, this whole thing about having, a loss on the record being fatal for someone's career just seems to be madness. And we've seen a guy like Michael Hunter's already come back from a loss against Alexander Usyk, no shame in that, and he's making a good fist of it at heavyweight. And if we come to Luis Ortiz, the last guy, and there has been talk in recent years about Ortiz being a boogeyman, and he has been avoided at different parts of in his career, but sometimes it's also been bad management. He's chopped and changed promoters right throughout his career. And more recently, he's a couple of years been stable at PBC. He's a PBC fighter. That's what helped get him the 2 shots against Deontay Wilder. And some Wilder fans and PBC fans in general like to throw out that no one is willing to face him, that these other guys, they won't call out his name, etc. But it's the same thing as Hunter, Bakole, Hrgovic. High risk, low reward. But also with Ortiz, the thing that hampers some of his opportunities is he's in the PBC stable. That's not necessarily going to lend itself to fights getting made easily with other silos like Top Rank and also Matchroom. But one of the questions that Ortiz's fan base, which is largely a Wilder fan base, let's be realistic, they don't seem to ask, why isn't the PBC matching him tougher with the PBC guys? They've got a very good heavyweight stable in their own right. Outside of the 2 Wilder fights that he's had, they've matched him very poorly. Razvan Kajanu, Travis Kaufman, Christian Hammer. That was an okay one, but he was an outside fighter brought in. Why aren't they having, because PBC loves having in-house fights. Adam Kovnatsky, most of his resume at the sort of top level has been in-house PBC fights. Why aren't they affording Luis Ortiz the same opportunities? Why aren't they setting up Ortiz versus Kovnatsky, Ortiz versus Charles Martin, Ortiz versus Gerald Washington? We can go on, Ortiz versus Dominic Breazeale, and you could even do an Ortiz versus Andy Ruiz Jr. It's a question. So I think, people can't just, say, oh, no one wants to fight the guy. He's got a slew of heavyweights at PBC that they should be looking to match him with, and it's as quiet as a mouse on the Ortiz front at the moment. Why aren't they actually making him an in-house fight if other fights are not viable right now? Seemingly, it should be easy to get made. Wouldn't you have rather seen Ortiz as the co-main event on this Wilder Fury card against, say, Martin or Washington, Breazeale, whatever? So I think some of the boogeyman talk, it is exaggerated for all of these guys. I don't think there is a boogeyman in the heavyweight division right now. I think there's just non-existent matchmaking. Fights can be made, should be made, but they aren't being made. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter. Boxing_squared. I'm out.